Dave, thank you so much for joining us. Of course, there's a lot of anticipation. The entire America is gripped into election fever as the process hots up. Of course, here in Africa, we're looking at an outcome and looking at what it holds for us. We're very familiar with President Barack Obama and what he stands for. And I know that you guys have predicted that he's likely to be returned to power. But let's talk about the Republican candidate, Mitt Romney.
Yes.
In the event that he does come to power, will there likely be a policy change, particularly on issues around economics and security for Africa?
Our view is that it's not so likely there'll be a policy change. It'll be a continuation of what's in place. But you must realise that the real focus for this election process and for the American public and for the presidential candidate and the president is the economy, the local, the American economy. So there's the real focus. I think from a foreign policy perspective, Romney's coming under a lot of pressure. So his conversation, his discussion yesterday about the implication of the killing of the ambassador in Libya was out of place. He'd been criticised by both his own party as well as the...
In fact, I heard a comment where people said he tried to gratuitously insert himself into the drama of what was going on.
Exactly, yes. And I think, our analysis shows that really the Republican Party's foreign policy stance and security policy stance isn't going to deviate significantly from Obama's stance. We know that the Republican Party are going to be a lot more confrontational, particularly with China, and that has implications with us in Africa because of the South-South trade. The Obama Act for the strategy on Africa that he launched in last year in 2012 really has not significantly changed the thinking that had been in place for the last 7 years. The pillars that the US policy is driven on, you could guess. It's all about pushing democratic processes, opening to trade, and security. And where we've seen Obama, and we've seen Obama be very effective, is in pursuing his foreign policy around national security. So we've seen a lot of American engagement in Africa, East Africa, across where we see terrorist actions. So interdiction in the Sahel region and against fundamentalist terrorist groups. So that will continue, and I think American foreign policy is going to be very much looking at national security, but at the same time supporting and bolstering institutions across Africa to assist, and we see that in East Africa. American interest, of course, is on its own economy. So we've seen a lot of activity supported by the US government in East Africa and South Africa, really supporting American trade and industry. And part of that is as a knee-jerk reaction to the BRICS emphasis on a different approach to Africa.
Let me come in there. Of course, South Africa is very mindful of having to do this balancing act. Of course, China is our largest trading partner, whilst the EU is the largest bloc with which we trade. But we're also not neglecting, our traditional trading partners like America. When US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton was here recently, there was a lot of emphasis on retaining AGOA and, of course, ensuring that we remain as part of that agreement. What is your sense around, the approach, should the Republicans in this instance win? Is AGOA likely to be something that they would want to continue to pursue? In fact, is it a party issue, or does the fate of AGOA actually lie in the US Congress?
I think it's a mixture of both. I think AGOA is when you look at US policy for what it is on Africa, AGOA is a key part of that, and very mindful of US trade and developing relationships, not just in South Africa but across sub-Saharan Africa. It needs the US government needs to be seen to be promoting trade and industry. So particularly with respect to the BRIC emphasis. So I suspect that if Romney wins, there will be some conflict, because he's got to balance the pragmatists, the business-friendly Republican Party against the much more conservative Tea Party element that dominates Congress. So he's got to finally balance that, and there's going to be a fair bit of conflict. I mean, the focus for sure will be on the US economy. Foreign policy isn't something that Romney's focused on, and trade worldwide, apart from China, which is seen as the big bear in the room. So Africa is not on the agenda, but it really, you know, although Obama has got a lot of goodwill around the world, and I think, you know, if you look at polls around the world, people would much prefer Obama to retain the presidency and to deal with him. Yeah. But a lot of that is because they see the perception of the Republican Party, the conservative side, and nobody really knows Romney. And he's a very sharp operator. He's a astute business mind, and you know, he will certainly, in place, once he's not pandering to the population and the voters, you know, he will have a review, and I suspect that there's not going to be a significant shift, whichever party's in power, with how America treats Sub-Saharan Africa and engages with Sub-Saharan Africa.
Let me bring in the question of Iran. Of course, South Africa gets a lot of its oil from Iran. We have come under pressure as a consequence of the US wanting particular stance toward Iran. How is this issue likely to play out? You know, obviously we know what the Obama regime wants. How is a player like Romney and the Republican Party likely to deal with the question of Iran? More confrontational?
Possibly so. But I think the substance won't change significantly. I think, you know, certainly there is a bit of pressure being applied by the Obama administration now, and will continue to be applied on South Africa with regards to Iran. And Iran's suffering from the economic trade embargo. You know, you've also got other aspects of regulations. You know, the economy is a global economy. So, you know, when you look at large South African companies looking to operate across Sub-Saharan Africa and in the world, you know, you can't avoid interaction with the United States, and then you come under the watchful eye of the United States regulators. So we see, for example, MTN coming under some pressure with regards to charges laid with its operations in Iran. And a lot of that is coming from the US, because of the regulator stance and on the FCPA and anti-corruption. So, you know, the engagement, but on the flip side, we are seeing large Chinese companies eyeing listing on the New York Stock Exchange, and therefore being regulated in exactly the same way as US companies. So I think it's the global trade environment, and you know, Control Risk, we're a member of the American Chamber of Commerce here, and you know, seeing how the US companies' investment and engagement in South Africa, you know, you can't dismiss it, even though you know, you consider China as a major trading partner. The US, the European companies will always be part of the fabric of the economy in South Africa, and particularly Sub-Saharan Africa.
Now, of course, whilst the economy is the central feature of what dominates the US election, security is never far from the US's mind. And of course, the fact that we have increased, you know, insurgency action, particularly in the Horn of Africa and towards the north, is going to be of concern. There's been talks about, you know, AFRICOM for the longest time, and traditionally there was resistance to AFRICOM. Some African countries seems to have changed. We know that the South African Home Affairs Minister has now taken over the chair of the AU Commission. How is security concerns going to be playing out, you know, if, for example, Obama doesn't make it for some reason? Is Romney likely to take a much more hardline approach?
I very much doubt it. I think, you know, if you look at how Romney's been approaching the election, you know, he hasn't got a leg to stand on when it comes to his security stance, his policy on national security. You know, traditionally it's been a strong point for the Republicans, and you'd expect the Democrats to have a more liberal stance. But I think, you know, what we've seen with Obama's administration is that he has demonstrated effectively the iron fist within the glove. So they've pursued a very robust strategy in pursuing their counter-terrorist operations around the world, and the Horn of Africa and across the Sahel region, North Africa, has come under the glare, and I don't think that's going to change. So certainly in the run into the elections, there's not going to be any significant difference in stance between the Republicans, Mitt Romney, and Barack Obama's administration, and it's difficult to see, other than potentially posturing, how execution of the strategy is going to change significantly post-election. You know, it's probably likely to be more of the same whether it's Obama or Romney. What you might have is a more conciliatory and reaching out approach from an Obama presidency. More engagement with AFRICON and you know, more of the same investment, but it's proved to be relatively successful, particularly on the East Coast and the Horn, and it's something that you'd struggle to see the Republican Party change significantly when they came into power.
All right, Dave, so much to still talk about, but we have to leave it there. That was Dave Butler, Managing Director for Control Risks for Southern Africa and East Africa, talking about the US elections and implications for Africa.